Today I'm talking to Sabine McKinnon, Senior Lecturer in Academic Development, and we're talking a bit about cultural differences and the impacts that they might have in the classroom.
That's right.
So I'm going to kick off by asking why university teachers need to know about cultural difference.
Well, I think we're all very aware that our classrooms have become increasingly international. Now, if you look at the numbers in GCU, there are over 1,000 international students from over 100 countries in GCU studying alongside their Scottish students. And some countries only send a few, just under 10, but some countries send quite big cohorts. For example, Nigeria is the biggest group in our university. They send about 200. And if you want to make sure that they have a good quality learning experience, it is wise to know a little bit about their background. So they have all been taught before, they have been taught at school and universities, and they have been taught in a certain way, and that shapes their expectations of what constitutes a good learning experience here. So it's definitely wise to have a basic insight into their backgrounds, their cultural backgrounds.
And what exactly do we mean by culture in this context?
Well, sometimes in spoken English and everyday language we refer to a cultured person, maybe like you. It's a concept.
Very kind.
It's like you like music and you like art and you like going to galleries and theatres, etc. That's like a concept of culture as a refinement of the mind. So that's one concept of culture. That's not really the one we're talking about here.
Okay.
So here it's a different concept, and that's a concept of culture being a set of values and beliefs that we all grew up with, that we all learn as children. So it's something like giving you guidance as to what to do and what not to do, how to behave in certain situations, what we consider to be right or wrong. It reaches as far as, what we consider to be a comfortable space between us and somebody else, how long we are looking at each other, eye contact. All that's culture specific. And the important thing about it is that it's not visible. We are not walking around with a sign around our neck saying my culture is A, B and C. But it's well hidden, but it impacts on how we respond to each other and how we communicate with each other. And it can sometimes come to the surface as conflict, as a problem. And I think that is quite important, that academic staff often perceive the first cultural differences they see as a problem. So they think we have problems with international students. So why might that be? The reason for that is, sometimes they don't behave in the same way in the classroom that we are maybe used to from our Scottish students. For example, they might not speak in class when you ask them. So why might that be? So sometimes that's really stressful for academic staff. They're saying things like, they never speak and I ask them questions.
And there's a sea of blank faces.
They never seem to engage. So some of them worry, we all make explanations. And they say, maybe they don't understand. Maybe I haven't really given enough instructions. Maybe it's too complicated. Or maybe they don't like me. But of course, very often, they are not the reasons for some international students, especially from Southeast Asia, not speaking. The reason is often that they have been taught not to challenge what they perceive to be a challenge. Challenge the teacher. They think they are in no position to develop an independent point of view until they have actually learned all the subject matter. So it's okay for the teacher to give an opinion, but not for the student.
So there's more of an expectation that they'll be delivered to
them. So they absorb what the teacher gives them, and they learn it, and they reproduce it in an exam. But when it comes to offering their own independent points of view, that's something they're not used to. That doesn't mean they're not interested. So it can be an issue.
Okay, we've talked a bit there about students from Southeast Asia. Are there any other examples you could give us to shed light on how these differences have an impact?
in life in general.
Well, yeah,
yes,
I
I think in life in general it's quite interesting.
mean, we'll all have encountered them in life in general
Yes.
and in the classroom, I'm
Yes,
sure.
of
So
course.
any of these examples are
Yes.
useful.
Yes, so we had a little bit of an example as to why Southeast Asian student or Asian students on the whole might not speak in the classroom.
Mhm.
By the way, that also impacts on group work. Some
Sure.
of them are quite uncomfortable with that. Now, from life, I can give an example from my own experience, of course. You know, I am German and I was brought up in Germany, and in Germany people are encouraged to speak their mind. You know, we are supposed to be honest in our points of view
Yeah.
and explain that honestly. We don't really believe in what I would say is the British way of hiding the real meaning
The
under
euphemisms.
very polite, yes, euphemisms. And you know, and you have to learn that language that hides
Yeah, I
your real
suppose so.
feelings. So if you are brought up in a culture that tells you you must be open and honest, not rude, but open and honest, to a British person, you can come across as being very rude
Sure.
and far too direct. And I think that's very well known. Germans, Dutch people also tend to be quite direct,
Okay.
and that can lead to misunderstandings and problems, or I would say challenges,
Yeah.
with British people on a daily basis. So you can see how I sometimes end up in all sorts of trouble.
Well, and do you think it's harder for the person whose culture, you know, let's say you're coming into a Scottish culture,
Yes.
is it harder for you to modify your behaviour? Because we've talked about this,
Yeah,
that you have
yeah.
in some ways
Yes,
modified
I have. Yeah. Oh, well, if you
modified
think,
your
yes,
your style in
yes,
that way.
adapted.
Adapted. Is it harder to do that, do you think? Or is actually what's harder is to read that new culture that you've come into?
I think
so
both.
the British thing of saying, well, I'm a little disappointed in
Yes,
that, which
exactly.
actually means I'm furious.
Yes, exactly.
That's very hard to read
Yes.
for you. What have you found?
I think both.
Yeah.
Right, of course, you know, first of all, you have to become aware that there are actually differences.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think most people would not notice that until they actually have to live in a different country.
Mhm.
It's just so implicit that we don't need to talk about it
I suppose
unless you leave that culture and enter a new one. So yes, definitely, I think you need to just play it carefully, and of course you make very many mistakes on the way,
course,
and I
yeah.
think you have to be prepared for that.
And learn from those mistakes.
And learn from those mistakes, exactly. And the more you experience that, I think the more you understand how the new rules work
Mhm.
in a new country. And of course you also have to rely on your British friends, colleagues,
Of
to
course.
maybe be a little bit more understanding,
Yeah, and
more
honest with
lenient,
you.
and not take offence when it's not really intended.
No.
So I think it works both ways.
So based on all of this that we've talked about, how can we use that knowledge to support international students better in their learning?
Well, I don't think that's actually all that difficult.
Okay.
And I think it's not fundamentally different from supporting our UK students. If we take action to improve our teaching, our mode of delivery, our instructions to students, to make sure they are clear, explicit and understandable, if we do that, we improve the learning experience for all of our
Of
students.
course, yeah.
So I give you a few examples of what I think is important, and that is explain things, be explicit.
Okay.
So about the what, why and how. So tell your students what they are going to learn
Mhm.
on this module, in the class, in this particular unit. Then add why you think it's important to learn that. That's not always clear to international
no.
students. And I can give an example in a
It's
minute.
not always clear to home students
No.
either, as you're saying.
No, and it's interestingly enough not always clear to staff either,
Yeah.
right? So what, why and how.
Okay.
And the how is to be very explicit about how you want the students to learn. So if you don't want students to memorize huge amounts of text and then reproduce it in an exam, tell them that.
Mhm.
That's not your expectation.
Okay.
What is your expectation? You want them to contribute in class, if they can.
Yeah.
You want them to contribute to group discussions. You want them to develop an opinion of their own. So all this needs to be explained.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that many Scottish students don't know that either,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially when they come into first year.
And direct entrance into third year
Direct
as well, of
entrance
course.
from college,
Yeah.
exactly. And explain the different forms of teaching. What's a tutorial? What's a seminar? What's the difference between them? What's a lecture? Etc. So that's definitely one point. Secondly, it's important to provide a clear structure
Okay.
and a measured pace when you deliver. So clear structure, I mean, in lectures, summarize something that's important. Come back to it and say, earlier I said this was going to be important. Now here we are, this is really very important. And signpost it and say, I'm going to remind you later on of what is very important. So another thing is, you might want to, for international students, pace your delivery, i.e. give them a bit of thinking time. Now, in our culture here in the UK and in Western culture, silence is not very common. In Asian cultures, silence plays a very important part.
Okay.
So, give us a bit of space to think about it.
And don't just jump
Don't
straight in.
just
like I
jump straight in. And we tend to jump in ourselves if the students don't talk.
Yeah.
We talk even more.
You give them the answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or to give them another mini lecture.
Okay.
So silence and pacing it in a measured way helps international students. It helps everybody actually.
Okay.
Good. So that's one. That's two things. And then thirdly, of course, we must not forget how we speak. Do we use lots of colloquialisms, acronyms? That is a real problem for international students. So we might refer to, in our own daily practice, to the QAA all the time.
Yeah.
We might refer to the EB, Executive Board in our university.
True. Yeah.
Even acronyms in the schools, the titles of the schools. All that is very difficult for international students. But you can help them by putting very common acronyms online, and the definitions are then clear to them.
So just making sure
in
there's
advance.
a glossary in your module.
A glossary in your module is very helpful.
Or in the handbook. Good idea.
And you see, all subjects have technical terms
Of course,
and have acronyms. And maybe we are forgetting how difficult it is.
And again, that will benefit home students, I'm sure. I've heard this phrase before.
Totally.
The canary down the coal mine, I've heard.
Yes,
can you tell me a
exactly.
little bit about that?
Yes, we can. I can tell you about that. Now, we use this analogy of the canary in the coal mine because they used to take canaries into the coal mines to test the atmosphere, to test the air quality. That was before we had machines to test that. So as soon as the air got thinner and had poorer quality, the bird would collapse. So now what does that mean for international students?
That, for the miners, that meant that an explosion
and for
was
the
going to happen.
miners, that meant it was time to get out. Now, how does that with international students? They're in a similar position. So if there are issues or problems with the learning experience, they're the first ones to suffer.
Yes.
But they're the most sensitive.
Yeah.
Because they haven't really developed the same coping mechanisms that very many other students have developed.
So you could expect
Hence
that
the analogy.
later on your home students might suffer in the same way.
Yes, most likely.
Yeah.
Or they might be suffering already,
of course,
but it might not be obvious to you, or even to them.
Yeah.
So that's quite a nice analogy. As I said earlier, improving the learning experience for international students, i.e. the air quality, to stay within the analogy, is good for everybody.
Yeah.
So that's quite a nice picture. So what we need to get away from is this idea of a deficit. The deficit model is really not one that's very helpful.
Yeah.
I.e. international students just don't know all these things, and we have to fill that.
We'll add something on a bit extra for them.
Yes,
Yeah.
or make it a bit more special for them. I mean, we should be aware of their background.
But we should be looking at the environment holistically, is what you're arguing.
Definitely. And of course, at the end of the day, there are other practical things I wanted to suggest, and that is use the VLE carefully. I think that's really supportive for students, the RGC You Learn VLE, and that you can do that. For example, you can post questions online before you put them to the students in class, because that gives them a bit of time to think about it.
Very nice. They've had a couple of days to...
Exactly, and sometimes they're worried about their English, and they maybe feel more confident if they have time to write that down.
Yeah.
Even questions for group work. We tend to spring them upon our
do.
students. Just ask this question. So it might be helpful to tell them in advance what questions you want to discuss in the groups. So, I mean, quite practical things. Again, everyone would benefit from that.
Sure.
Good. And of course, let's emphasize we have to be flexible.
Yes.
So if students, international students who are not used to public speaking as such, do not like doing presentations and it stresses them totally, maybe we have an alternative way of testing those learning outcomes. Again, some Scottish students don't like them either.
Of course, yeah.
So maybe we have to be flexible for all our students rather than insist on certain things.
Sabina, many thanks.
Thank you.